In this video, we are going to take a look at South Carolina versus Uconn. Uconn came through tonight unscathed from their game against Seton Hall, pretty much controlled it the whole way through as they won 67 to 34. The post-game news conference had very little to do with the actual game. It was really reflective on Auriemma getting his 1200th win and him sort of reflecting on the different times and eras of Uconn. The big quote coming from it was him probably saying that he would not wind up the all-time wins leader in basketball. Make of that what you will. Is he just being gracious, or does he have a plan to get out? Who knows? Anyway, you could speculate till the cows come home. Obviously, he was asked about UConn's upcoming game against South Carolina, and he was reflective on that as well, saying, normally we are in the game of the year prior, earlier years it was Uconn versus Tennessee, and then this recent rivalry with South Carolina and other ones, maybe Notre Dame as well. But his overall point was this matchup would not be that, as Uconn is not the team this year that they've had in the past, where and he sort of missed having that gun of a team where you knew you could go into any place, anytime, and you felt like you had a really good chance of winning. And he wasn't saying they couldn't win the game upcoming against South Carolina. He's just basically saying that they were all aware that it would take an extraordinary effort for that to happen. Now, generally, South Carolina just doesn't lose at home. The last time they lost was in December of 2021 when they were upset by NC State. Carolina will play one more time versus Missouri before they match up with Uconn on Sunday. The matchup with Missouri should be interesting, as they will not have Camilo Cardoso, who is playing on the Brazilian national team for the Olympic qualifiers. So she will be out for the next two games and won't play in Sunday's game as well. So the contest versus Missouri on Thursday might give an idea of what their starting lineup will be. You would assume it'd be Watkins moving over to center and Chloe Kitts returning back to the starting lineup. She's been out of the starting lineup for a few games as she's had a bit of a sickness, I think. Then the first big off the bench you would think would be Fagan. But the other question is, I'm curious to see if they start getting Sakima Walker more time. So she played 4 minutes versus Ole Miss in their game on, I believe it was Sunday. The question is, will they start ramping up her minutes, and will this be her time to get a little bit more playing time to sort of see what she might be able to do for next year? Conversely, in the Uconn game versus Seton Hall, DeBerry got 6 minutes, which is the most garbage time I've seen her get recently. So are they ramping her up for the break glass option in case Uconn gets in foul trouble? As that's a real concern for them right now, is if one of them gets in foul trouble, then I guess DeBerry's your last option, really. It'll be interesting when these two teams face off, if it will be, well, I assume it'll be Bueckers on Chloe Kitts, if that's what the starting lineup is, if she's playing the power forward spot. And then how long do they stay to that? Does Uconn bring on Ice Brady a little bit early? Well, obviously they would if they're getting crushed with that matchup, but I think they'll try to see if they can manage that for as long as they can, because they'll feel like they need to get as much scoring as they can. Even with Cardoso out, this will obviously be a massive challenge for the Uconn front court. I mean, Edwards has been solid all season. The only game I can recall her struggling a lot this season was versus UCLA. But since then, it seems like every game she's getting a double-double or close to that. I think she's gotten a double-double in the last 4 out of 5 games. This game will also allow Uconn to see how much Ice Brady has grown during the Big East. Has her confidence improved, and can she take on the quality front court? She looked good in the highlights of the game versus Seton Hall. She had one pass out to, I believe it was Shade, for a three-pointer. She had a nice turnaround where she didn't back away. It was just straight away. She got it, made her move, and got to the basket. So it should be interesting to see what she looks like versus South Carolina. But really, this game is about Paige Bueckers and her going up against a big-time program, and what will she look like. So her numbers coming back, she's come back well, obviously, from the ACL injury. If you look at her stats, they are very similar to her stats in her freshman year. So she's averaging 20 points like she did freshman year. And she's scoring efficiently as she's over 50% from the floor and shooting a ridiculous 47% from three-point range. Now, her scoring numbers aren't as high as Caitlin Clark or maybe Juju Watkins, but her efficiency goes off the chart, and generally she makes other players better. That is what her game is. But she does have a big hole in her resume, at least this season, which is she has lost some of the head-to-head point guard battles. So when UConn went to Texas, Roy Harmon outplayed her. Like, Roy Harmon was the best player on that court that day. And then again, when UConn got upset by Notre Dame, again, Hannah Hidalgo was the best player on the court that day as well. And well, this will be a big matchup against South Carolina as Raven Johnson and Fool Wiley and Tahina Paopao, they can all play and defend. And obviously, South Carolina can play defense and have bigs to back up their guards. So this is the game that she sort of needs to show up and deliver a big game, as if UConn's going to have any chance, they basically need Edwards and Bueckers to fire. They just can't have one. And in some of those games, Becker hasn't shown up. And then in the UCLA game, Paige Bueckers showed up and had a good game with 31 points, but then Aaliyah Edwards didn't do her part. So they need their big two to play well, obviously, and she needs to have a big game on the big stage and show people, no, I'm not just beating up on lesser competition in the Big East. I can actually eat off the big programs, the big teams, and win a one-on-one matchup. Now, in terms of what this would mean for the programs, I guess winning on Sunday, for UConn, the key is not to get blown out or embarrassed, or like UCLA got embarrassed versus Stanford. They want to put up a competitive battle and not lose out on a top 16 seed. If they go down by 10 or 15, then they can make that argument. They can win out the Big East and then really set themselves up to have, you know, a top 16 seed so that they can play the first round at home in the NCAA tournament. For South Carolina, they're just playing with house money. I mean, they can lose a game anytime this season and not even worry about it or sweat it. It'd almost be like, hey, we've got the monkey off our back. We've got that loss. We don't have to worry about going the undefeated season. Here we go. And especially if they lose to UConn, which they would hate. I'm not saying they're going to go out there and try to lose, but if they did, they would just say, hey, we didn't have Cardoso. We had to adjust without her, and it's one of those flukes that happen. But that being said, Dawn Staley would not be happy, as I think she wants to give it good to UConn after the whole issue in terms of Geno calling out the reffing and their style of play last year. So I think if South Carolina has a chance to run up the score, I think they are going to push it as hard as they can. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to the matchup on Sunday, really just to see where UConn's at and how much they've grown over the season, or if it's a bit of a mirage and they've just been playing easy talent in the Big East. So it should be fun to watch and sort of get a gauge on where they're at. Anyway, your comments, poison, everything's welcome. Thanks a lot for watching. Good night.